Hello, welcome to Picture Me Coding with Eric Aker and Mike Mole. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
How are you doing today? Fine weekend, January 2026.
I feel kind of bad because it's like 70 degrees here and sunny, and my other family members are sending me pictures of their cars being buried in snow and stuff. So I apologize for gloating.
Yeah, my brother-in-law in Maryland was like, yeah, looks like school's canceled again. You're not supposed to mention that, though, when people are suffering so much. You're not supposed to talk
Yeah.
about the riches of the weather riches.
Well, if it's any consolation, we may burst into flame any day now. So
That's true. We may totally run out of water, too. What have you been listening to lately, Mike?
I've had this one album on repeat for maybe 2 weeks now. It's by this artist who calls himself Dove Ellis. I don't
Uh,
believe that's I don't
Me
believe
too.
that's his real name.
Oh, okay. I don't know anything about it except you sent me this, and I was like, "What is this?" I can't put my finger on it. It reminds me of something. What does it remind me of?
He's a Irish young man. The album's called Blizzard. Dove Ellis is not his real name, apparently.
Hmm.
Sort of indie rock, folk rock, maybe.
Hmm.
I think I read one interview which called it chamber pop, which I have no idea what that is. But
That's your favorite genre, according to Spotify.
so I've seen comparisons of him to Jeff Buckley. I've seen comparisons to Rufus Wainwright.
I
If
was
any of
thinking
those
that
people,
almost kind of Neutral Milk Hotel, or do you remember that band Clap Your Hands, Say Yeah? The singer had this way of sort of droning a little bit. That makes it sound worse than it is. I mean, I like this record, but I was like, what does this remind me of?
yeah, it's just a fun record. It's great tunes, and they all kind of build a little bit. So it's most of them start off as fairly slow and quiet and sort of build. Some of them are a bit anthemic by the end, but it just makes me want to listen to it.
Hmm.
The lyrics are not particularly insightful. They're a little bit cryptic, and I think he's attempting to be poetic, but
Hmm.
just really enjoyable songs. Nothing too weird or unfamiliar, I guess.
Not too antisocial metal.
This is interesting enough, but also mainstream enough that most people would probably be willing to give it a try.
Hmm. Hmm. I thought so too. It's fun. I liked it. I was glad you recommended it to me. So, Mike, one thing that I have been remiss at is checking our email inbox. And I checked it this week, and we actually got an interesting email that I wanted to read if you're up for it. It was about our last episode about functional programming, and I thought you would find this email interesting. Again, friends, if you want to reach out to Mike and I, you could send us an email, podcast at Picture Me Coding. Sometimes I'm bad at checking it, but I usually get around to it once a month, once every couple of weeks. So, Mike, check this out. This email comes from Forrest. He sent it last week to us. He says, "Hi, Mike and Eric. Apologies if you've mentioned this before, and I just missed it. But after this week's of discussion of functional programming and Lisp, I wonder if you guys had ever read, get this, Mike, Gödel, Escher, Bach, and Eternal Golden Braid by Douglas." Yeah, I thought you'd get a kick out of that by Douglas Hofstadter. What do you think about that question there, Mike?
It's an excellent question, and I get the connection. I remind people that I am quite old, and so I've actually read Gödel Escherbach twice. Once when it first came out, and a couple of years ago when I was going through a let's reread all the things I read in my 20s phase. And yeah, it's a bit of a challenging book, but it's I would definitely recommend it to people who are interested in such topics.
Well, I want to read to you a little more of Forrest's email, but just to answer that question right out, have you ever read this or mentioned it? I don't think we've talked about it on the show. Mike, you've read it twice. Mike and I both recently read Hofstadter's more recent book, I Am a Strange Loop, and that was born out of I think an interest, a drive in thinking about consciousness and minds and things as it relates to the topic of AI programming. So I haven't read Gödel Escherbach ever. I've always thought I should probably read that book, but then I read I Am a Strange Loop and thought, maybe I'll pause on it for a bit. Mike, you gave me your copy of Gödel Escherbach, so I'm a little bit remiss in not reading it. Forrest continues that the book briefly describes Lisp in its discussion of SHRDLU, which I had never heard of. He says a rather interesting early shot at a natural language program. The book released in 1979. So reading about it in the age of LLMs is almost kind of eerie. And I think that's a really interesting point, Forrest. I'm glad you raised it. I have the same feeling about I Am a Strange Loop. It's like there's a precursor or prefiguring going on here. So Forrest continues the wider scope of the book is quite broad, but it is at least in part about the Gödelian recursive nature of consciousness. Hofstadter calls his concept strange loops, and how genuine machine intelligence would likely mirror that uncertainty and recursion. And Mike, I'm curious what your take is on this. Forrest writes, from what I understand, it had a pretty large impact on the coding, hacking, computer science community of the 80s and 90s. And I'd be quite interested to know if you both have had any run-ins with it. Is that true, Gödel Escherbach? Large impact on the coding, hacking, computer science community, to your
I would
knowledge?
say that's correct. Yeah. At the time, it was kind of almost like an in joke, it was one of those books that people referred to by, its initials. So
That's how Forrest refers to it in this email, GEB, and I I tried to
yeah,
acronymize
people
it.
called it GEB, and it was kind of like a cultural touchdown. If you hadn't read it, you were really among the cool kids. I think things started to diverge a little bit from his approach in the 2000s because his approach to AI was very different than what evolved out of the machine learning world. Yeah, at the time it was very influential, and I think had a lot of influence on not just what people did, but on sort of like the we talked last time about how there was this sort of surge of interest in functional programming that was mostly the early to mid 2000s, and I think a lot of that was probably people who had come out of that tradition of reading that book and getting interested in Lisp and related problems, and so I think it was very influential.
We got another email from Tim Lavoie. He had emailed us before. In the past, we had seen one of his emails. He said he enjoyed the functional programming episode as well. Lots of cool info. He liked our description, but he did sort of take issue with something we said. He said, I find the idea very strange that functional programming might actually matter less because it's harder for LLMs to generate correctly. He does admit the whole vibe coding thing drives me nuts. He says, I admit as the cranky old guy who still drives stick. And Mike, that made me think like, oh, Mike would probably sympathize with that. You know who else I bet would sympathize with that? David Beasley, who came on the show in the past. I think the vibe coding thing drives him nuts as well, based on his public social media posts.
I'm sympathetic to that view, definitely. I also, we didn't really make this point when we were talking about it, but there is a part of me that wonders if the lack of relative popularity of these languages really matters. I think there's an argument to be made that they definitely punch above their weight if you look at the places where these languages are used. Things like Haskell and OCaml are used in places that are doing very sophisticated things that can't fail. So like the hedge fund Jane Street, for instance, is sort of famous for being all in on OCaml. I don't think anybody would argue that they don't know what they're doing. So
yeah. Well, I think Tim's on going in the same direction to what you're saying. In his email, he says, can they usefully correct bugs in their code, or is the task to just re-ask the LLM to return a slightly less broken mashup of what it did last time? And he sort of says, I think things they should be able to help us with are exploratory tinkering, rubber duck debugging, summarizing docs, sentiment analysis includes in there, and code review for dodgy program patterns where I expect it to fall flat. Tim writes is when the output actually has to matter. And what I was saying last week is I got interested in functional programming because I felt like the output matters. I want to have some greater assurance that the program is satisfying the goals. And I believe that with functional programming, with referential transparency, with these mathematical properties, I can more rigorously express my goals in the code. And maybe we were a little too pessimistic, maybe a little too negative last week. Tim finishes out, maybe Haskell will succeed after all this all crashes and burns, precisely because it can reject realistic looking garbage before or instead of executing it. Thanks for the email so much. Thank you so much for reaching out to us, Tim and Forrest. It's really rad to have people listening to the show, vibing with what we're saying, and feeling incentivized to actually reach out and talk to us about it. It feels like it's a conversation at that point. I appreciate so much when the people take the time to write to us with their comments and thoughts. And again, if you'd like to, reach out to us, email us, podcast@picturemecoding.com. We are sometimes on Blue Sky as well. And if you'd like to support the show, we do have a Patreon. We have a $4 a month membership, and it helps us pay for editing and hosting. Mike, what'd you have this week? You wanted to talk about something in particular?
What I wanted to talk about this week is what I think would broadly be called recreational computing. I think it may just be a little bit of a nostalgia trip. I've been having conversations with a lot of people recently about how they write less and less code and turn more and more of it over to the LLMs. And, even myself, I feel like they've gotten qualitatively better to the extent where you can often produce adequate code with them. And so it just does feel like soon there's going to be this whole idea of writing the code as a human is sort of slipping away from us. And so
that's a bummer. I hope we're not going to be pessimistic this time.
Yeah, I reserve the right to be wrong about that. I hope I'm wrong about that. I hope that, as was discussed in these emails, there's some applications just turn out to be so high consequence that using the right languages and taking some human care is the right approach. But I guess long story short, I've been feeling sort of nostalgic for the days when not only did we write code, but we thought it was fun to do.
But you still write code and find
it
fun
to do. But there was a time when, and I realize people still do this, but there was a time when there was a pretty big community of people doing, what I would call recreational computing, which meant, writing code that was really meant just to solve fun problems. So it wasn't like a side project where you were trying to build some open source tool, or, it wasn't something like Lead Code or HackerRank where you were trying to build skills. It was just, a thing that you did because it was diverting and absorbing, and the outcome of it, you might accidentally learn something, but there wasn't really there wasn't really an end goal that involved anything other than finding the answer. And it's a way that a lot of us learned at a certain period in history, and I fear that it may be history now, which makes me sad.
Wow, that seems just way more pessimistic than I thought when you pitched this topic to me. And although when you said, I do think immediately, like David Beasley has been on Blue Sky, on Mastodon. Sorry, he's been on Mastodon lately talking about his adventures and trying to build Ed, the editor, the Unix-based editor, Linux-based editor.
Yeah.
He's trying to write Ed in Rust, and he's like shouting from the rooftops. Like his barbaric yop is, I'm writing this thing and I don't care if it has any purpose whatsoever. It's like, That guy is the poster child for I'm going to be out here crafting code for fun until I die. And as soon as it becomes unfun, I'm not doing it. Like I'm moving on to project number 2. He doesn't care about having open source repos that people can use. He's purely doing it for his own entertainment. You really do think that that's maybe seeming quaint now in 2026 because of
It
AI
does
coding.
feel that way. I mean, he's obviously a very notable exception, and I'm sure there are many others. But so just to give you some history, there was a time when this was pretty standard, pretty normal. So, well, as an example, there was famously Martin Gardner's column in Scientific American for many years called Mathematical Games. And Hofstadter, who we've mentioned a couple of times already. yeah.
Thanks again, Forrest, for the
he wrote a
for the
column
tie-in
in
there.
Scientific American after Gardner called Metamagical Themis, which was turned into a book, which has been one of my favorite books for a long time. It's just one of those things that's fun to sort of like crack open and read a chapter. But after both of those guys, there was another column written by a computer science professor named A.K. Dewdney, which was called Computer Recreations.
Wait, so tell me what era
this would have been
like the 80s?
Late 80s, early 90s. I can't remember exactly what his years were, but it was, for me, perfect timing because it was kind of in the middle of my late high school, early college years.
Okay, so Dewdney, he writes a thing called Computer Recreation.
This was also
where
in
was
Scientific
Where did you read this?
Scientific American. And there were other columns in other magazines at that time where, people would put in code listings and write a solution to the Towers of Hanoi problem in their particular pet language or whatever.
So what kind of stuff would show up in Computer Recreations? What did you read in there?
So there were a couple of things that he was particularly famous for at the time. I don't know if these things have persisted into 2026, but probably the most famous one at the time was something called Core War.
Like a capture the flag?
Yeah,
thing?
so Core War, the idea was there's a little bit of computer history in here. So, there was a time when the main memory of a computer was called the core memory. People sometimes still use that terminology, but
I gotta need some help. Where's stack and heap fit in? Core memory, is this operating system memory, like the operating system zone?
The term comes from the actual physical construction of the memory in very early computers. So
you mean I got to think about real stuff that exists in the world physically now? All right, I'm ready.
I think we actually talked about this in a previous episode in some context,
and it did not stick. I just cannot get the physicality of computers in my head. Sorry, Mike. I will continue to fail.
I would note that this was this column came out long after these sorts of computers had gone out of regular usage, but in very early computers, the random access memory was, you couldn't get very much. Like 8,000 bytes was a huge core memory for a long time in early, like say PDP 7s or something like that. And they were, the actual physical construction was, you had these intersecting wires with little circular magnets at the junction of the wire, and they called that a core memory. So by the time Dewdney wrote his column, which was, I don't know, must have been 85, somewhere around that era, people were already using memory IC memories. So the computer that I had at the time probably had something like 128 kilobytes of memory, but they were spread across a handful of integrated circuits. So it was long past the days when people actually had core memory. But anyway,
I'm thinking of like the computers in war games or Weird Science or something like that. We're in the 80s.
Yeah, we're in the 80s. But this was like post personal computing era. So people, enough people at this point in time had access to things like Apple IIs and IBM PCs and stuff like that. So if they were reading this column, they could conceivably
Okay.
sit down and write it at their own computer. It wasn't a lot of people. It was a
Okay.
pretty nerdy community compared to the vast universe of people involved with programming now. The idea was in the early days, computers didn't have this sort of virtual memory space that's common now. So if you let a program now, your program gets its own virtual memory space, and it can't really touch the memory space of other running programs. And so the idea of Core War was
Mm-hmm.
that you had this sort of virtual machine, which gave you this like virtual memory of, I think it was 8,000 words of memory. And then there
Mm-hmm.
was
Mm-hmm.
a very limited instruction set also associated with this virtual machine. They called it Dewdney called it red code.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was that you would
Hmm.
write a little
Hmm.
program. I guess we would probably call it a bot now, and
Mm-hmm.
your bot would essentially try to destroy other bots in the memory.
Hmm. Okay. So you try to like overwrite where the other bot exists in memory. So you're trying to
Right.
like take over that, right? Zero
So
out
the idea
their
was
their
this
their
virtual
code.
machine worked in such a way that it had a very primitive time sharing thing where it would run run one program. So it would like execute the red code instruction for one bot and then execute the red code instruction for the other bot or however many were in the system. And
Mm-hmm.
that would proceed until the virtual machine found a instruction at the next instruction pointer value that it could not execute. And that would happen because one of the bots, or I think they called them warriors back in the day, would write something into that memory location that the virtual machine could not execute. So basically, it would write a data item
Hmm.
into some memory location that was supposed to be the next instruction for the other program. And so the idea was to survive as long as you could and to stop all of the other bots from executing. And you could do that by writing data into the memory, and you could do that by jumping to various places and kind of replicating your code. And so there were many different
Hmm.
strategies that people would use to try to survive the longest. And this
Mm-hmm.
evolved into initially it was just one person writing two bots and competing them against each other, but it got so popular for a while that it actually did turn into tournaments where people would have like annual conferences and they would
Wow.
bring their
Really?
best bots and battle them against each other. And
It sounds kind of fun. Also sounds kind of pointless. Do you think fun has to be
it
pointless?
was
Is there?
it was pretty pointless, except you might, as I said before, as a side effect, learn some stuff. And I think for me, as a very very early on in my computing career, it it has exposed me to a couple of things. So I had already done quite a bit of assembly language programming by the time I encountered this, so I understood kind of what they were trying to do. But the idea that you could simulate a computer with a computer, that was that was the first time I'd ever encountered this.
Oh.
uh,
Okay. Interesting. Okay. That sounds like a Hofstadter kind of
yeah,
strange
so it was a
thing,
really
almost,
interesting
doesn't it?
idea, and I mean, it was fun to play the game. It was fun to try to figure out strategies to win the game.
Did you try to play, or did you just do it? And
We did we did play it among my college roommates, and I wrote things to compete against myself and so forth. And not long after his first column on this came out, you could download emulators from bulletin boards and stuff like that. Remember, this was
hmm.
pre-internet era,
Well,
so
okay. Tell me about what's a recent thing you've written in code just purely for your own entertainment? Anything, any just an example. Any examples from recent history? The last fun thing you worked on.
So probably a couple of things. I think we've kind of obliquely mentioned a couple of times that I have on and off been working on a sort of book that I call "How Does My Bleeping Computer Work?"
Mhm. Mhm.
where bleeping is, whatever swear word you prefer, yeah, in whatever
Mhm. In
language
whatever
you want.
language you want.
And I've written a lot of really tiny programs to illustrate things in that, and I wrote a silly uh, random number generator in ARM assembly language to demonstrate some
Oh.
things. And
But so the reason I wanted to ask was I think the key that I keep thinking about of this Code War thing, Core War, sorry, Core War, Dewdney's Core War. It sounds fun. It does sound fun, but I want to know why. Why was that fun? And then I was like, are you still able to have the same fun, or are we just more cynical now, or something? Like what, what like tarnished that type
I
of?
think it
Where did
was
it go?
fun for a number of reasons. One was just because it was an interesting idea, and it was, if you're into that kind of stuff, just getting your bot to work was kind of a fun thing. So you
Okay, so it's a novel thing. Like, "Oh, I've never seen this before." You go into this room where people are doing, I mean, abstract metaphorical room, but people are doing something new.
yeah, and you're
And that's
programming
like,
a
"Oh, that's kinda
thing
cool."
that has a it's a very simple thing, but it has a purpose. You're using this simplified red code, but you're kind of trying to come up with a strategy to survive. And so it's kind of an interesting exercise just to sort of build one of these things to compete. But also, it's a game. So it's effectively a turn-based game. If you think about it, it just happens to be a turn-based game that evolves very rapidly.
Okay, so there's like a goal, like the very specific goal
Yeah,
is
and I
what
think, for
what
the
I'm hearing here.
time, this was effectively a computer game that you could write yourself.
Mhm,
In
mhm.
2026, it probably would seem a little primitive, but at the time, it was just kind of fun to write a thing and then play it against another person's program or your own alternative program and just watch it evolve. And it was uh, it was effectively a game, and but it was a game that required you to do some programming, so it definitely qualified as recreational programming in my view.
Okay, alright. I guess I want this is not easy, but I'm kinda trying to figure out what's fun about it. Like, what's fun about doing crossword puzzles? What's fun about puzzling in general? What's fun about solving problems? I don't know, actually. I can't
Yeah,
tell the I can't say. I have had fun writing programs in the past. Do I have fun writing programs lately? Mm, kinda.
I guess I would compare it to something like I don't know, maybe Tetris or
I play a lot of Tet that was the target for that was specifically aimed at me, right? I play Tetris every
yeah,
week
I
as like
forgot you
a
were a Tetris nerd.
de de detoxing from work brain.
But yeah, it was an interesting problem, and it was purely recreation. You weren't building these bots in order to solve a business problem or to build
Hmm.
infrastructure. It was just fun to do for reasons we can't totally articulate, I
I
guess.
maybe I'm overly Yeah, I might be over philosophizing here, but I feel like that fun, that recreation part, it's like it's got to be kind of pointless. It can't have, oh, I'm advancing my career, or I'm making money off this thing, or I'm trying to build cred in this community. Like, you cannot have a point. And I mean, of course, computing, it doesn't have to be the only recreational activity, but I feel like recreational activities are not, it's not like exercise, like I'm trying to be fitter, I'm trying to be stronger, healthier, I'm trying to live longer. It's like, no, we need to be pointless activities is what we need. Do you have any other examples from the past that make you think of that, or
There was another column by that same person that was by Dewdney
Dewdney?
in computer recreations that was very influential for me in particular. I should note also that all of these columns were collected in a book called The Armchair Universe that I think is still in print.
Do these columns all include like assembly code that you can
No,
copy or?
one thing about his approach was that he rarely included code listings. He did sometimes,
Hmm.
but a lot of times it was mostly just sort of conceptual explanation. You know,
Hmm.
he might say you should, you know, you can store this in an array, or uh, you can you know, search this in a tree or something like that. But he never wrote out a lot of code listings. There were some
So it
exceptions to
was
that, but for the most part, it was he was just giving you ideas that then you could code around.
left as an exercise for the reader.
Yeah.
So what was the other one then that had a huge impact on you?
So the other one that I remember doing to this day and having a good time with was, I forget what the actual column was called, but the idea in the column was something called finite living blobs, or what he called flibs. It was inspired by kind of by the work of John Holland, who was a he worked on sort of emergent systems in their very early days and kind of invented the idea of a genetic algorithm. And
Oh, okay.
so flibs were in particular inspired by the idea of genetic algorithms. And so it was kind of like a primitive form of artificial life. And
Hmm. Like Conway's Game of Life?
a little bit, but not quite so much like a cellular automaton like life. The idea behind flibs was you had these creatures that had a sort of DNA. So each flib had a chromosome of a sort, and the
Mhm.
chromosome was essentially a finite state machine.
Okay, so it can edit itself?
So the finite state machine, it was one slightly different thing about this finite state machine is that in addition to having an input, switching states on an input symbol, it also had an output symbol. So,
Okay.
say for instance that the state was state A, and then it
Mhm.
encountered a one, it would switch
Mhm.
to state B and then output a zero, let's say.
All right.
So,
I'm this sounds pretty abstract for like genetic algorithm or a living thing or chromosomes. Like I'm having trouble making the connection.
so each flib had its own state machine, which
Mhm.
corresponded to its particular chromosome or its
Mhm.
particular DNA encoding. And then you would put all these flibs into what you would sort of abstractly think of as an environment. And the
Okay.
environment was very simple. It was just a sort of randomly generated sequence of bits that would repeat. The successful flibs, their state machine would do a good job at predicting the environment. So
Wow,
the
that's an interesting idea.
the idea was that it would encounter this series of bits, and if its output bit matched the input of the environment, then that was a success with respect to that was a success for the flib with respect to the environment. And essentially, what you would
Hmm.
do is you would run each flib through many steps and see how well it matched this environment string. And if it matched well, that was considered to be a evolutionary win. And so the ones
Hmm.
that scored well, meaning that they matched the environment the best, would survive into the next generation. And the ones who scored poorly would get, metaphorically killed. If it were just that, that probably wouldn't have been that interesting. But then what would you would also do is there were two ways that you could evolve the flibs.
Mhm.
And one way was that you could breed them. So there's this idea in genetics called crossover, where two chromosomes sort of combine with each other, and you in this flip program you would do sort of a simplified version of that, where you would take the chromosomes of two of the successful flibs and combine them into each other to get a new chromosome, or effectively
Mm.
a new state machine.
Hmm.
And sometimes when you did that, you got something that was better at matching the environment. The other change that you could make is that every once in a while you could introduce a mutation. So you could just take one point in the chromosome of the flib and randomly change it to a different thing. And
Hmm.
so it was intended to sort of mimic the processes that drive evolution in the real world. And
So can I ask? It sounds like part of the fun here. I'm guessing is watching behavior which is emergent.
yeah,
You didn't anticipate what was going to happen when you started hacking on these things.
yeah, that's what turned out to be fun about it. I in the process of this, I'm learning about certain things. Like when I encountered this, which again was, I would guess, mid '80s. Uh,
Hmm.
I I really didn't know that much about finite state machines, so just
Hmm.
learning about that idea and programming in what would have probably been C at the time was an
Hmm.
interesting challenge. And this idea of having like a program that goes through a series of time steps, and
Hmm.
uh, you have to modify things through these time steps was kind of interesting. But yeah, you're right. The part that was compelling and fun, I guess, was that you would watch these things evolve through various generations, and at some point, it often took quite a bit of time, but at some point something would evolve that matched the environment very well, and you would see this sort of sudden change where creatures of that type would suddenly dominate in the environment. And so, like you say, you'd see this emergent behavior that would just sort of come out of um, repeating the same process over and over again. And
Hmm.
it was both kind of fun to see, and also like something clicked in my head about how actual evolution works.
Wow.
This process is so simplified that you can't compare it too closely to actual um, genetic evolution, but just the
Hmm.
idea that when something would evolve that matched the environment well, it and its progeny would start to dominate the environment was an interesting concept. It just sort of was an epiphany to me to see how that behaved, and I hadn't really thought of
Wow.
it in that way before. So
So this is another trait. It's not just fun. It's not just this pointless activity that you maybe learn something that's engaging, but there's a surprise involved in it. There's this emergent behavior where you see something become something else that you didn't anticipate. The the flib succeeding by being best able to predict its environment reminds me of this theory of consciousness that's come out of cognitive science and philosophy and neuroscience over the last 15, 20 years called predictive processing, where the theory is that human brains, they cannot actually process all of the information that they're taking in through sensory input. Like if you were to actually think of your eyes and say that the brain has to process every single point of light that the eyes take in predictive processing, they're saying, no, no, no. What actually happens is that the brain is predicting what it sees and then correcting its prediction based on the visual input. It's not actually processing all of that, like chewing through all of the data through the senses. It's actually just using that to validate whether its predictions are correct. So it's funny that something so simple, so basic as what you're describing could be kind of going in the same direction. But the fitness is predicting the environment.
I think it was interesting to me because you sort of grew up thinking of fitness as being something associated with strength or size or ferocity or something, and really it's just the ability to be suited to the environment and use that to pass on your genetic traits to the next generations.
Hmm.
And so I don't know. It was fun to program. It was fun to sort of monitor. If
Hmm.
you, depending on how frequently the environment string repeated, it could happen very quickly, or in the computers of the day, it might take. I might have to start it in the morning and come back the next day to see something evolve, and so
Hmm.
it was just fun to play with. It probably hurt my grades for a couple of semesters, but
Because you're dumb.
yeah, it was a lot of fun to do, and
I'm trying to think of my. Go
I
ahead. Go
just
ahead.
don't I haven't done anything nearly that.
Consuming, maybe all
Yeah, I
consuming.
haven't done anything that all consuming that had no business objective. Like, I've worked.
It's that pointless, that all consuming and pointless.
Yeah, I mean,
You've never played Minecraft, Mike?
yeah, I should probably confess that I do not play a lot of computer games now, so maybe that's what's missing in my life. But
Yeah, Minecraft. I think what you need is something all consuming and pointless, and the name for that is Minecraft. I'm trying to think of examples for me. I think when I first learned Haskell, one of the first programs I wrote in Haskell was this taco shop name generator. It was like, I don't know, 50-line program, and it was just a joke that all these taco shops in San Diego end in Bertos. So there started with Robertos, and then you see like, oh, there's Philly Bertos, and then there were all these just randomly named, but they always had to end in Bertos. So I made this jokey program in Haskell called the Taco Shop Name Generator, and friends of mine still bring that up. Like I put it on my website. It's just a dumb program. All it did was randomly combine things with the suffix Bertos, and you could say how long you wanted the name to be. Um,
for those
I
of
guess
you,
mazes.
who
Go
don't
ahead.
live
Go
in
ahead.
Southern California, there used to be a million taco shops called Robertos, and
Yeah.
then the people who started the original Robertos decided that they didn't want other people benefiting from their name, so they insisted that
Hmm.
all the taco shops that had called themselves Robertos stop doing that, and so that's why you ended up with things like Filiberto.
Filibertos, and there was a Taco Bertos, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
There were all kinds of Bertos. Just and I guess we should say a taco shop is like a fast food restaurant here where you can buy burritos, rolled tacos, things like that. You get a lot of hot sauce. You get chips. Those are the taco shops that we have here in San Diego. Fish tacos. A lot of people order fish tacos. Is popular. All right. But I was going to say the other fun thing I remember doing is working on the Mazes for Programmers book, but I didn't do that on my own. I heard this book was cool, so I went out and bought it and I started playing with some of the mazes in there, and I got about halfway through it, and my son and I would generate mazes, print them on the printer, and then he would draw in like monsters like it was like a D&D dungeon and stuff. And that was pretty pointless. And I still have one of those from when he was 5 on the fridge. He was like, "We could throw this away now." And I was like, "I don't want to throw that away." It was like, "There's your treasure you drew into the maze." And he's just like, "Why are you keeping this dumb piece of paper with my 5-year-old scrawl on it?" Did you ever do mazes?
I did. The very early part of my professional career, I still had two good friends who were college roommates, and we would do various things together, even though we at some point lived in different cities. So I had moved to California, and I think they were both living in different cities in Arizona. This was again pre-internet, so we couldn't really jump onto Signal or a Zoom call or whatever. So we would send each other emails and talk about various things. And we decided at one point to do a maze solving contest. And
Oh.
we, for a variety of reasons, always ended up in Phoenix over the holidays in that era. And
Mhm.
one of them lived in Phoenix. So we built this thing to generate random mazes. And then we each wrote programs to attempt to solve the maze using various different strategies. And then we basically did a competition to see which solver could solve them the fastest in
Hmm.
on a given computer. Also very fun. Also, you do learn some computer science in the process of that. If you haven't,
Graphing algorithms. I gotta say that the learning part of it takes away some of the fun for me. I don't want to learn anything, Mike.
I don't mind learning things as long as it's not the objective, which is like why I say I've always resisted things like lead code and hacker rank. I don't want to prove anything to anyone. I don't want to demonstrate skills for a job. I just want to be amused, I guess.
Yeah, that sounds pretty lame. Is it really what we're saying here that this type of pursuit, just recreational computing, recreational software writing, there's no way that's not going to go away. People are still going to do that, I'm sure. That's not going to go away. Your fear, maybe, and we don't have any data or anything. Your fear is that maybe the rise of coding agents, vibe coding, means that this activity is diminished, that people are less likely to do this. Is that, do I state it right?
I think that's definitely a part of it. I think, it's harder maybe to motivate yourself to write a piece of code that could be, it's going to be a small piece of code, but it may be pretty sophisticated because you may be attempting to use an algorithm you haven't seen before or a data structure you haven't seen before. And knowing that an LLM has seen 1,000 variations in this and can probably write it in an instant in your favorite programming language is maybe demotivating.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
it's hard. It's
Okay.
hard to
Interesting.
since I'm not 20 anymore. It's kind of hard to know how people feel about that. I do think people will probably continue to do this sort of stuff in the same way that, there are still people who like to, rebuild their engines and things like that.
Mm,
Um,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's,
Or go surfing. That's a pretty pointless activity. Actually, riding a surf mat. That's even more pointless.
yeah, I don't know if it's quite in the same realm. I run for fun, so I probably shouldn't judge other people's recreational activities, but
You're saying the next time somebody sits down and they want to go, oh, what is this thing? A Van Emde tree. I want to write one of those. That maybe there's a little demon on their shoulder that's saying to them, don't do it. The AI could do it for you. It's so much faster and cleaner and quicker, and it doesn't even matter anymore. It's more pointless than it was. But that was the point, right? That there's no point to it. This is purely for our own interest.
I was doing some research to see if there are any still any like popular columns or popular YouTube sites or things like that around recreational programming.
Hmm.
I didn't find anything that was stuck out. There do seem to be some things they seem a little bit more mathematically oriented than code oriented. One thing I did find is that there's a biannual conference called Fun with Algorithms,
Hmm.
which is
A conference? Conference
a literal conference. And this year
with badges? That doesn't sound that fun,
it's
Mike.
in France this year. It was in uh,
Oh,
it
okay.
was in like Sardinia or something last in 2024.
Oh, that could be
I
cool.
looked up.
In Italy.
I came across this because Donald Knuth had published something that he had apparently presented at the 2024 version, which had a bunch of recreational problems, and
Hmm.
you know it was games and fractals and puzzles and stuff like that. But I decided to look up some of the papers that were published in the 2024 version of this conference. There were a couple of fun ones, no pun intended, but so there's one
Mm,
called P-Space Hard 2D Super Mario Games, colon 13 doors. I did
hmm.
not read the paper, but this was published by what's called the MIT Hardness Group, which I
Mm. With that guy, Eric, what's his last name? He does the Super Mario is Turing Complete stuff. Is he in there?
probably, but I sort of desperately want to be part of the MIT Hardness Group now. Eric Demain,
Yeah, that
Eric Demain, is that the guy?
that's that guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He does all kinds of stuff. Yeah, he did Super Mario Brothers is Turing Complete.
yeah. That's that. He's one of the authors on this paper. Um,
Yeah, yeah. He teaches like an intro on complexity classes, I think.
It says we proved piece-based hardness for 15 games in the Super Mario Bros. 2D platforming video game series. Um,
I, Mike, the paper title does not sound fun. I got to tell you,
there's another one called
fractals. Fractals sounds fun.
Fractals.
Let's go make fractals this weekend. Let's write fractal programs this weekend.
Fractals are fun.
No AI assistance allowed. Well, you could do research. I don't know how. I don't have a clue how to start writing fractals. Isn't it like triangles?
Oh, there's all sorts of approaches. I have books. I have a book called Chaos and Fractals, in fact.
I gotta write a book to program a I just want to like hack it together just for fun. It's got to be pointless.
Yeah.
No learning.
I went through a pretty serious fractal phase, especially with Mandelbrot sets and Julia sets.
Oh, you've got an advantage then.
That was probably
Let's make some chirpy posts, some chirpy blacklight posters with our programs, Mike.
Yeah. I was watching an old TV show not long ago where there was like a teenage character, and the character had like Mandelbrot set posters on their walls. And I was like, whatever happened to that? That was a thing for a while. Another paper from the Fun Conference: a programming language embedded in Magic: The Gathering.
I don't know, Mike. It sounds like, hey, here's a fun thing, which I can also write computer science into. Right? Here's a fun, pointless activity playing Super Mario Brothers. Oh, by the way, we demonstrate that it's piece-based hard.
I don't.
Here's Magic: The Gathering. Oh, by the way, there's a programming language embedded in there. It's Turing complete.
I don't think either of these qualify quite as recreational programming. They do sound like a lot of fun. The people who wrote them are clearly having fun doing it, but it's also, pretty researchy. You'd have to have a pretty solid background in certain academic fields to really get these papers. So it's
like space classes.
Yeah, it's not like the good old days when they were writing these for amateur programmers to hack out over the weekend.
Maybe I'm stupidly poo-pooing it. It's a don't yuck my yum thing. So I don't feel comfortable saying that people. I mean, obviously, people are going to continue having fun with recreational programming, but how do we find those people? What are they doing? Who's doing that? And is it unfair to just like not include the people who are writing open source projects for fun? I feel like sometimes people have a point with open source. It's like, yeah, I want to write this open source application or library. I want everybody to use it. Okay, then that's crossed the threshold from recreational computing for me. Is that too unfair?
I think of it as being a different thing. I mean, I totally get that people can have open source projects that they find fun in working on. As we pointed out a lot of times already, those things typically have a purpose. They're trying to make a better compression algorithm, or they're trying to make a better web server, or that kind of thing. And that's great. And I admire people who have the energy and enthusiasm to work on those things, but I don't think it qualifies as recreational programming.
Okay, so what are the attributes that qualifies it as recreational programming? What puts it in the set?
Well, there's kind of a tautology, which is it's recreational if you're doing it for fun. And only for fun, I think.
It's got to be pointless. The only reason you do it is just for fun. You can't be trying to build a community, build a product, build the next greatest X.
Yeah.
It doesn't count anymore. You could have fun doing that, is what we're saying. Okay, but it doesn't count as recreational, is what we're saying.
I sort of resist.
I want more examples.
I sort of resist the word pointless.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable with it, but it's the only thing I came up with.
When children are playing together, they're not trying to do anything with a practical objective, but I don't think it's pointless for them. It may not be the same, may not have the same outcomes as recreational programming. Maybe a socialization thing, or something developing their imaginations, or something helping them understand the physical world better, but they're mostly just having fun. I don't view that as being pointless, I guess. I don't know.
Let's add creativity.
I don't know if the alternative.
Let's add creativity.
Yeah, creativity is a part of it.
Because a pointless activity could be, I'm just going to hang out in my house all weekend doing drugs. That's pretty pointless, but it's not very creative.
Yeah, I mean, like binge watching The Simpsons is fun and pointless, but
not creative.
So it's hard to pin down, and I don't want to disparage anybody's hobbies. So
Yeah.
I don't want to make it seem like this is some special thing. I think the reason I wanted to talk about it is partially just because I kind of miss it. And
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to see if there's still people doing this and if there's still a community around this kind of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
also,
Stuff like Core War,
yeah,
stuff like Flibs. Does that stuff still exist?
yeah, and I think there's aspects of it. Like probably 10 years ago now or so, I took a game playing class on Coursera.
Mm.
Um,
Or like Capture the Flag at Black Hat they
yeah,
do every
that
year.
kind of thing.
People talk about how much fun that is.
Yeah, I think that definitely qualifies. There's an aspect there where people are trying to demonstrate their skills, but it's not. I don't know. I haven't done it, but my guess is that people are probably not like throwing out their best O days to capture the flag. It's probably something that anybody with sufficient experience can participate in.
Mm. Well, I don't feel like we have a good summary on this one. I don't feel like we really drew very good borders around the idea. Recreational computing seems like okay, creativity is probably involved. It's probably just fun. Maybe pointless is not the right word for that, but fun is the point in itself. Fun is a tautology. You do something fun because it's fun. That's the tautology. Kind of like GNU is not Unix.
I guess the other question I kind of wanted to probe here is, why did it go away? Why is it not? Because I feel like when I started out in the '80s, this really was this was part of the culture of computing. Writing
Hmm.
writing games was a thing that came out of places like MIT and Stanford. Space war games and stuff like that. It was always part of the computing culture to do things that were just kind of silly and fun. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, does that still exist, or was it kind of destroyed by the idea of things like leak code? Or
Or making money.
yeah,
Yeah, was it destroyed by the
yeah, like
Can you do plumbing for fun? I'm talking pipes and water. Can you do that for fun, Mike? Is that a horrible? That's probably a
I,
very bad connection.
I'm almost certain there
Not
are
a useful
people who
analogy.
do plumbing for fun.
Recreational
There's
plumbing, Mike. Does that exist?
there's I would bet money there's a YouTube channel for it. Um,
I'm looking it up right now. Now I want to know. Recreational plumbing. Does this exist? Recreational plumbing. Nothing comes up. Nothing at all. Foundation. It's all like nobody does this for fun.
I
Google recommends this search: recreational plumbing near me.
uh, yeah, the recreational plumbing store. Well,
There is absolutely nothing that comes up for that. It's just, well, maybe it exists, but it's just absolutely crowded out by my drain is clogged. I need to find someone to come to my house and fix it, please.
I'm gonna find it now. I know that I've watched videos on people who do masonry for fun. So
Hmm. Okay. Okay. I was thinking like concrete work, but then it just thinks okay, like an artist. All right. Well, how's about this? We've gotten some great emails from our listeners, Forrest and Tim. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. If anybody has recreational computing projects, contemporary ones, just for fun, creative, fun is the whole purpose. Let us know, please, so we can add those to our example set.
and also
And
not AI
go ahead.
related.
Yeah, I wasn't sure to include that. I think that yeah, we got to say no AI, no LLM stuff. It's just humans doing pointless human activities, right?
Yeah, as humans will.
Well, thanks, Mike. I wonder. There's a little bit of nostalgia in here, but I think your question holds up. Is this a thing that went away? Do people still do this? Thanks for walking me down the path of the Flibs and the Core War. Though I had no idea this stuff existed.
Yeah, I've long wanted to do an episode solely on AK Dewdney. He's sort of I guess I would almost call him a hero of mine, but um, he also kind of got weird later in his life and became a 9/11 conspiracy theorist.
Oh,
Yeah.
So you're early Dewdney fan, not a later
Yeah,
Dewdney fan.
I like his early work.
Well, this has been Picture Me Coding with Eric Aker and Mike Mull. Thanks again for listening. Thanks for reaching out, and we will talk to you again soon.
See you next time.
Bye bye.